Welcome back to another episode of the Cattle USA Daily Podcast. Today we are once again welcoming back Paige Harding. Paige is an attorney from Southwest Kansas and a dear friend of mine. Paige has been on the podcast a few times now, and this is the third week in a row that we are bringing you guys some topics and things within the legal space of the agricultural world, and specifically estate planning. We've kind of been on an estate planning kick recently, and today we are keeping that kick going. We are talking about estate planning and the realities of estate planning with blended families. What does that look like, and how can we practically approach these really difficult conversations when it comes to estate planning, succession planning, and everything in between? Blended families are really common these days. I come from a blended family on two sides, so this podcast is extremely relatable to me because I am working on estate plans with all of my family members right now, all of my parents and my step siblings and everyone else, and it can be a little bit of a headache. Paige breaks all of that down for us today and how we can walk away with some practical tips on how to get started, what we need to be doing, and how to approach it just in general. Before we hop into this podcast with Paige, if you could take 2 seconds to like, subscribe, rate, and review, we would really appreciate it here at the team. It allows us to continue to grow this podcast and grow our audience and continue to impact more cattlemen and women within the industry. But without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into this podcast with Paige. Paige, welcome back to the podcast. Today we are back another week and another podcast talking about estate planning and the just cluster that it is. If we're being real, if we're being honest, if our friendship has taught me anything, it is that estate planning, if not done well and if not planned out, is going to be a disaster and going to be a little bit of a mess. And today we're talking about things that can get a little messy, and that is estate planning with blended families and just family dynamics in general of how crazy and complex that can be. So Paige, when we're talking about blended families and complex dynamics, break that down for us. What are we going to be talking about today?
When I say blended families, I'm talking about situations where one or both spouses have children from a previous relationship, and then they might even have children together. So these complex dynamics, I mean anything where relationships between family members, even in traditional setups, might create challenges. So it could be second marriages, stepchildren, sibling rivalries, or just very different life goals among the heirs. The bottom line is, if you don't plan intentionally, these things can fall apart fast. So it's important to explain family dynamics to your attorney. When I am having my first consultation with someone, I feel like I freak them out sometimes because I'm asking so many questions, but I want to get down to the nitty-gritty of what's going on, and any other attorney is probably doing that same thing, asking you a million questions. So everyone wants to believe that their kids will get along well in any sticky situation after the parents are gone, but unfortunately, that's not always the case. And it's nothing to be embarrassed about. In fact, it's quite normal. I see it every single day. I promise if you have some story to tell me that you think will be embarrassing, I promise you I've heard worse. But because it's human nature to not get along, especially with your siblings. So I can typically sense when people are having a hard time explaining their family dynamic to me. And one thing, like I said, I want everyone to know that I've probably seen worse, and whoever your attorney is, I guarantee you that they have seen worse as well.
So when we're talking about planning and family dynamics and the mess that it can be, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see in these blended family situations, Paige?
The biggest mistake I see is parents who assume that everyone will just get along and everyone will just do the right thing and it will just work itself out, because it does not. Grief can bring out the best in people, but it can also bring out the worst. And when we're talking about estate planning right now, it's cut and dry. We're having a normal, typical conversation. But the thing to remember is that an estate plan kicks in after someone passes away. And that is a very emotionally charged time. Not only are you grieving the loss of a loved one, you're having to make a million decisions And then you have to execute their final wishes, their will or their trust. Another huge mistake is simply leaving everything to your spouse without thinking about what happens after they pass away. So with blended families, you need to have special provisions outlining what happens when either spouse passes first. For example, let's say that mom and dad both have children from a previous marriage. Well, if mom dies first and her assets pass to dad, does she want her assets to go to his children instead of her own? So you need to outline those fine details and what ifs. Many times, I think that a trust is the best way to protect blended families, but you need to speak to your own attorney to go over some options and see what is best for you. But many times I use a trust for blended families. And this is a great way to protect each spouse's original plan and protect both sides of the family. So sometimes I tell people that my job is to imagine every single horrible situation, every single thing that could possibly go wrong, and figure out how to not allow that to happen. And I find that a trust is the easiest and best way to do this for blended families. But like I said, make sure that you talk to your own attorney about your specific situation and see what options they think are best for you.
Paige, can you break down why a trust is maybe the best way to plan and how these families can plan a little bit better in these situations, and why you think that that is like kind of just like the best, biggest tool that people can kind of utilize?
Yes. So there are typically a couple different reasons, depending on someone's situation, why I might recommend a trust over a will. The first is if you have a lot of assets. And many farmers and ranchers have a lot of land, a lot of equipment. Cattle are super high right now. And so a lot of assets, I typically recommend a trust. Another reason to recommend a trust is for control. People who have very fine details about the control of their asset distribution, I will recommend a trust, because when you're using a trust, you can set clear instructions about who gets what, when, and under what conditions. So this will help to outline almost like an instruction manual for what assets you want to go to who after someone is gone, after your loved one is gone. Another thing that I find very useful with a trust is that you can hold the land in trust for several years or hold certain assets in trust for several years, and it doesn't have to be distributed right when someone passes away. So this can be a very useful tool to use in certain situations. A few other things that you can do are life estates. You can give your surviving spouse the right to use property during their lifetime, but guarantee that the land goes to your kids after they pass. You can also create a very detailed beneficiary designation for things like life insurance, retirement accounts, to make sure that those go exactly where you want them to. And again, I want to remind you that these are just options. You need to speak to a professional to determine what is right for you in your unique situation.
Yes, absolutely. I think that is like the biggest part of this is finding a person that you can trust and someone that you can talk to about this. On the topic of talking about this, communication is probably the biggest, most important aspect of any of this. Nothing is going to get done unless we are able to communicate, unless we are able to communicate well. Can you talk about why communication is so important and how to communicate during all of this?
Yes. So communication is absolutely critical. That is really where I think that families will have a very strong relationship coming out of estate planning, or you can see some issues start to bubble up. Really, I tell my clients that they can do whatever they want because they can. They don't have to tell their kids anything. And after they pass away, if that's when their kids read the trust for the first time, if that was my client's wish, then, that's something that I can't stop them with. I tell them that they really can do whatever they want. But in my experience, I think it's at least good to put your children of notice about what's going on. So if you don't want them to read the exact documents word for word, they don't have to, but I think it's good to at least give them an idea of what's going on so they don't have that shock factor along with the grief that they're experiencing when when you pass. It will make things easier down the road. But like I said, my clients can do whatever they want. Planning behind closed doors without explaining your decisions almost always causes resentment later. Even if the conversation's hard, it's better to be honest now than leave your family guessing after you're gone, guessing why you might have done something a certain way. That can lead to litigation sometimes. I typically find that when people understand why decisions were made, they're a lot more likely to honor those decisions and not ask questions and not try to go against the grain. Like I said, that can cause litigation. Really, though, it is whatever my clients want to do. However they decide to handle those affairs within their own family, that's their personal business. But like I said, I like to encourage them to at least put their children or their heirs on notice of what's going on so that there's not that shock factor later.
Yeah, 100%. And I think like the beautiful thing about trusts and estate planning is you can be as detailed as you want on these. Like you can go nitty gritty on everything that you put in there, and it can be a super specific document that outlines your wishes in the best way possible. And from my experience, coming from a blended family on both sides, and as I'm at the age where I'm like, I'm knocking on my parents' door, like, hey guys, I don't want to think about you dying. But if you did and we don't have this in order, it would be a disaster. I'm like type A, oldest daughter on both sides. I'm the one that's like, guys, we got to get organized on this. Like we need to be organized on this. We need to talk about it. And those topics and conversations aren't easy, especially when you're talking about step siblings that like I didn't grow up with my step siblings, and talking about this stuff with them is not fun and it's not easy. And we have a great dynamic. My parents have been married for years. Like step siblings have been a part of my life for years. It's still not easy. It's not fun, but it's one of those situations that it's like, I would much rather sit here across the dining room table from you guys and have this uncomfortable conversation with mom and dad in the room than I would have it at their funeral. Like that's the reality of it, and it's not fun, it's not easy, do it now, and talk about it now and start figuring it out now, because it's complex, it's extremely difficult. We have been dealing with this for months, but it's one of those situations that it's a lot easier to do it now than to wait and just not know. So if someone is listening to this today who has a blended family, Paige, what are some like just different first steps that you would recommend to kind of navigate the complex dynamics of this?
The first thing I would do is really think about your situation. So I had a client come in the other day. Dad had children from a previous marriage. Mom had children from a previous marriage, and then they had several children together. So when we were sitting down to come up with their plan, we were discussing the fact that obviously both of their children that they have together would get probably a bigger piece of their pie because dad's children had a different mom who they would be sharing some, getting some wealth passed down. And then mom had children with a different dad who would probably be getting some wealth passed down. So you really need to think about your unique situation because it may be a little bit more complex than you think. Think about those super specific fine details that might be unique to your situation and what you want to do to pass down your wealth and your assets to the next generation. Think about how that's going to work for you in your unique situation. Next, start by asking yourself, if I passed away tomorrow, would my wishes actually happen? If the answer is no, or if you're not sure, then it's time to sit down with a professional. You don't have to have all of the answers right away. Like I've said before, you have to plan today as if something were to happen tomorrow, and starting the conversation is the first and most important step. So think about your unique situation and then start the conversation in order to get the ball rolling on those extremely important decisions for the next generation and generations to come.
Wonderful. Paige, thank you so much for just sharing all of your thoughts and all of your wisdom on this. We really appreciate it over here. And I know all of our audience members do. I always love sitting down with you and talking about these things, whether it's officially on a podcast like this or just like chatting about it, because I feel like I come away with not only a to-do list of things that I need to do in my own life, but also just feeling so validated, because family dynamics are hard and estate planning is hard and it's not fun. No matter how comfortable talking about it you are, you're also dealing with a lot of other people in this situation. And if nothing else, I hope that everyone listening to this can also feel that like, hey, family dynamics are hard. Estate planning is hard. It's not fun, but hopefully you're able to come away with at least one to-do list item that you can start tackling today. Because it, like we've talked about before, Paige, this isn't something that you need to get done in a day. This is something that you need to kind of chip away at. It's not easy to sit down and do this. And if you probably tried to sit down with your parents today, or at least if I did, if I sat my mom down today and was like, we need to get all of this done, here's our 50-page to-do list, fill it all out, we would leave that conversation in that day not wanting to talk to each other for months, because it would just not be fun. It's very emotionally charged. It's just not fun for anyone. So let this be something that you can start chipping away at slowly but surely. And on that note, chipping away, Paige, you have an amazing, amazing guide that you have, a free resource that you have spent a lot of time creating and putting together. Take a couple seconds, break that down for us, and letting all of our listeners know the free guide is linked down in the show notes, so make sure you go check that out. But this is a great little piece of something you can take away today to go start chipping away at this.
Absolutely. So I created the Estate Planning Essential Information Guide. And this is not a legal document. This is simply a practical tool to help you get your affairs in order to help the next generation, or whoever your heirs are, wrap up your estate more cleanly and nicely after you pass away. They will be thanking you later, trust me. So this guide goes over essential information such as, just your birth date, where marriage licenses are located, where your safe is located, what's the code to the safe, where are the vehicle titles to your car, what is the Netflix password, what is your email password. This hits a wide range of information that will make it much easier for your loved ones to wrap up your estate when you're gone. I promise you they will be thanking you later if you have this document filled out and all of this information readily available for them. So take a moment, go down to the show notes, get this free downloadable guide and fill it out. Get to work. It doesn't have to be done in one day. Rome wasn't built in a day, but you can get a lot done in a day. So take it section by section, fill out one section per day until you're finished. And I promise that you will feel so much better after you have done this. Not only will it help your loved ones later, but it will probably really just help you to feel super organized in your life right now. So click that, get that, and work on that, because that is a great first step to help you in the estate planning process. Like I said, not a legal tool, but a practical tool that will help you and your loved ones down the road.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Paige. And to all of our listeners out there, go check out those show notes, and we will see you all tomorrow on another episode of the Cattle USA Daily Podcast. Have a great one, y'all. We'll see you next time.